Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Transforming Trauma to Triumph. I am your host, Diana Min, and we have a very special guest today, Mr. Park Howell. Hi, Park. How are you?
I'm great, Diana. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. I'm super excited to talk to you today. So, Park is an author, a speaker, and an entrepreneur, and someone that we're going to learn so much today about storytelling. So, Park, for our audience who's not familiar with you and your work, just give us a little bit about who you are, what you do, who you help in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Diana. This is awesome. So I have been in the advertising, branding, marketing world for 35 years, and I've always looked to help leaders of purpose-driven brands, companies, organizations, nonprofits that are trying to have an impact in the world through their business to help them grow, help their people grow through communications. I ran an ad agency, my own ad agency for 20 years. So I grew up in the traditional ad agency world. And along about 2006, I realized it wasn't working like it used to. And I was kind of ready to do something else. And so I started studying story, how we Homo sapiens use it to bewitch each other, to connect with each other and to move people to action. And I just fell in love with it. It was just absolute curiosity of mine that took me into this whole new passion field of helping business leaders, as I say, craft and tell compelling stories that sell. And it starts with everything from your personal brand story to your professional brand story, how you show up at the office, and the intersection of that, to organizational brand stories, which is where I cut my teeth. And that's what I do today. I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the power of story, and I do it around the world. Now on Zoom, we don't get to fly anywhere until
Yeah.
COVID is over, but before that, I was all over the place doing this.
Wow, wow. And I mean, the power of story is, I can attest in my own business. I think, once I really started to share my story about, how I got here and the struggles and the challenges that I had to overcome to be there. It's like that, like you said, it's a connection point. Like people, like humans, like you said, Homo sapiens, like we connect with each other through like that vulnerability, through that emotional aspect. And, I think when any company, a brand, or a person has, like I said, a compelling story that is so relatable, you're able to draw in like your soulmate clients, people that connect with you. That resonance is so powerful.
Without a doubt. And let me ask you, Diana, when you started telling your story, your authentic story, the highs and the lows, the ups and downs, was it hard for you? Did you feel like embarrassed and vulnerable? There's no way you were going to share that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember when I did my first interview where I told my story in full. I had a little bit of a panic attack after, when realizing the interview was going to be released, and I was like, "Oh my God, people are going to hear me and see me and know like all this stuff about me." And it was really tough. And I was so surprised when I was met with so much love and support and compassion and just encouragement. I mean, there were some people, obviously, that were just not people that were in the story that were not happy about the story.
You
But
didn't change the name to protect the innocent, though, I will tell
I
you.
mean, yeah, I wasn't changed. I was more about like my family, you know what I mean? Because more my story comes more from like my trauma, like growing up and things like that. So they obviously weren't happy about that. They're more traditional, that whole idea of like, you don't air out your dirty laundry to your neighbors. Like you don't tell people things you go through. And I'm like, and I'm not like that. I'm like, you should tell people because this
Hmm.
will help others. Right?
Yeah,
Like I've helped so many
absolutely.
people that have like reached out to me after and just told me like that they had similar situations or like, they could resonate.
It really does. And then, it informs who you are as a business leader. And if they know that you can be that open with them, it builds trust. So a story is nothing more than the conveyor of the truth. A story is about truth. Now, let me say, people tell untruths in their stories, and they tell stories that aren't true. But the thing is, they always get found out. The truth eventually comes out. And the thing about that is, you've got a story, whether it's a very positive story moving forward, or it's like the really ups and downs you've been through, or something that's impacting the company right now.
Mhm.
Tell it in all of its truth. I say it in its glory and its goriness,
Mhm.
because that truth is going to come out. And the thing about that truth and that story is it creates trust. And without trust, you as a business owner, you as a business are going to be nowhere, because people buy from people, and you have to create that trust. And that comes through the stories you tell, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful, powerful, so true. So what about your story? I want to hear a little bit more about you, and like, I know you said you worked in advertising and things like that, but like, how did you get then into storytelling, and why is that like your passion? Um,
Yeah. Well, great question. So I was in the advertising world for about 10 years, cutting my teeth, working for lots of different people, but I've
yeah,
always been an entrepreneur. Even when I was a young man, I was out mowing lawns, and I had all kinds of little businesses. I cut firewood and delivered it in Seattle, Washington for $50 a cord of wood. And I mean, I just always loved being an entrepreneur and being, self-reliant on my income. So I started my ad agency parking company in 1995 in Phoenix, Arizona. And Diana, my goal was to build this big, fabulous agency that, the whole world would look on and say, oh my God, how did he do it? He grew it from nothing. It's just amazing thing. And I just found that, number one, Phoenix, Arizona is maybe not the best place to start an ad agency in hindsight. Um, you know, but not using that as an excuse. We built it. We built a really great agency, and it wore me out. I was in it had it for 20 years, but first 15 years were fun. The last 5 years, I was exhausted. I was tired of it. And everything was changing so quickly because of the internet, technology, and how people were marketing, that I knew that I needed to make a change for my own personal preservation, as well as the preservation of our wealth and our business. And I looked at it and studied it for 5 years, and I realized I had to close down my agency and make a major pivot. But before I did that, I was studying story. As I mentioned, we were lucky. My wife and I have 3 kids, and our middle child, Parker, he went to film school at Chapman University in Orange, California, graduated in 2010, and he's been in Hollywood ever since. He's a director of mixed reality movies and films, and he's been into movie making his whole life. Well, when he first started going to school in 2006 was the same time I started having this crisis moment of, my God, this doesn't work anymore. It's not even that much fun anymore. It's not even really cool and creative anymore. I was just losing it. And so I started studying story. And I said, look, dude, you're in film school. They teach you how to be a competitive storyteller in the most competitive storytelling market in the world, LA. I told him, I said, send me your books when you're done with them, since
yeah,
I'm paying for them. Because I want to learn, what do they teach you that I could apply in my world? And I got like this virtual cinema class, film school through him. And that is, Diana, when I realized the immense power of story when you use them in frameworks like Hollywood does. And the framework I'm talking about in particular is Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. When
uh,
I saw that, and I thought, from my branding marketing side, I'm like, oh my God, this is like the holy grail for marketing communications. How come nobody teaches us this? So I took it, and I took the 12 steps of the hero's journey, boiled it down to 10, and mapped it to business so that I could bring in this template to narrative and help business people get their minds around it. And grant you, I didn't know if it was really going to work or not, but I tried it out on one client in 2009. We did their whole brand story using this approach that I was learning as I went through with them.
yeah.
It worked beyond my wildest imagination. We launched their whole new brand story in 2010. It was a community health center in Arizona called Adelante Healthcare. And Diana, I can tell you, they launched it in the past 8 years. They grew by 600%.
Wow.
And Sati Tafoya, the CEO, now she has moved on from there, but the past CEOs will tell you that growth was a direct correlation to them getting their story together and learning how to tell it properly. That was my big aha moment. So I was going from like this existential crisis in 2006 of like, oh my God, I'm getting on in my career. I don't like this anymore. It doesn't work anymore. What the hell am I going to do now? And
Yeah.
it was just following my passion of storytelling and learning how to do it. And now I teach others.
Beautiful. And it was like that happened so that you can get more in alignment with what did bring you joy and what was your passion, right? So
Yeah.
how would one, let's say we, any business owners that are listening, and even for me, like how would one evolve from an intuitive to an intentional storyteller to more to captivate their audiences a bit more?
Great question. So you and I and everybody watching and listening to this, we all have one thing in common. We are Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
And because of that, we are intuitive storytellers. And what I mean is we're basically storytelling apes. It's what separates us from all the other,
Yeah. Yeah.
out there. I mean, there's a few more things, but really we are able to think, plan, and imagine in story. And we don't know of any other being anywhere that can do that. And that's why we are the most aggressive, invasive species of all time. So we have it built into us that we are intuitive storytellers. But what happens, Diane, in business? We show up and we want to look smart. We want to sound smart. So what do? We lead with logic and reason and ration. We share our data and our boring PowerPoints, and we roll out our charts and graphs because it makes us look really smart. And you know what happens? That storytelling monkey sitting across from us that we're trying to connect with is going, what the hell? My brain is not actually wired to understand what you're talking about
Oh my God.
unless you put it in the context of a story, a real world event. It happened to someone somewhere so that I can imagine it, envision it, and act upon it. That's why I tell people, show people, I want to move you, train you from being an intuitive storyteller, which we all are, to an intentional one, using these storytelling hacks, if you will, these unbelievably powerful, proven frameworks that when you are writing something or you're communicating or presenting, present them in this algorithm of story that I've learned and I've shared with tens of thousands of people. And that's what I mean is get people thinking in story as you are writing and communicating. It does a couple things for you. It makes you first totally understand your audience because your audience is always at the center of your story. So you understand and empathize what journey they're on. Then you pick from your arsenal of stories which story you want to tell them that they can relate to and live vicariously through, to connect with them, demonstrate what you want them to do or how tomorrow could be better today through this other story. And that's how you bring the Homo sapien world into your world.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was laughing because I'm thinking of how many times, like, I've been in situations where it's the charts and the things and the logic and all. I mean, some people like our logic, but like you said, by nature we are like storytellers. We want to be. And anytime that I've been in a presentation where somebody does captivate me in the story, like it is like, we create this visual in our head and we're viscerally there in it. We're experiencing it. And it's the way you put it, like it's so night and day, and like it makes so much sense. So for you, like what makes a good story, and is there a simple way to tell it that it works? Or
trouble, problems,
challenge?
conflict.
Yeah.
You have to have misery in your story at some level. Otherwise, it's not a story. And think about it. Whenever you and I or anybody wants to attain something in the world, you want to do something, you set out to do it. And what happens? The world and the universe inevitably punches us right in the nose. It's like, oh, yeah, Diana, how bad do you really want it? Because you know what? We're going to make you all of a sudden lose your biggest account and take your money away. We are going to now make you go on a trip to see a loved one who's sick for the next 10 days that you weren't counting on. Life throws us these curveballs and these right hooks all the time. And without that, if you have no conflict, you have no story. So that's the first thing I want people to remember. And then can I give you an example? So
Yeah,
I was sitting a year and a half ago in Melbourne, Australia, and I was down there doing some work in New Zealand and Australia. And I was sitting with this gentleman, he's a 59-year-old guy. He's a big-time sailboat racer, but he made his money selling car washes in Australia. He came from Stockholm, Sweden. And here's the deal. It's a really interesting character. When he was like, I think 21 years old, he bought himself a 24-foot sailboat and he sailed solo from Stockholm to Melbourne, Took him about 6 to 8 months, he told me. And
Wow.
he's a handsome, sweet guy. He's got the great Swedish accent telling me this story. And he loved Melbourne so much, he stayed there and he made a living, a really great living, selling high-end German car washes into Australia and then servicing them. It is so much so that he now owns a 42-foot sailing yacht, just to give you an idea. But he was skeptical, and he asked me, we were having dinner one night and a little bit of wine, and he says, Park, what story, business, that I don't understand. How do you use business, stories in business? And so I asked him, his name was Per, P-E-R. I said, Per, when you were sailing from Stockholm to Melbourne, did you ever have that Tom Hanks moment, in Castaway, where you're all by yourself and like you're on your last leg and the whale showed up and splashed some water on you to wake you up, then winked at you and went off and you communed with nature? And he goes, no, that never happened. Then there was a long pause, Diane. I didn't give up on it. So it was awkward enough. He finally looks up and he goes, well, there was that one time. And I go, what happened? He goes, well, I was down the Galapagos Islands and I was going to navigate and sail through this channel that I'd never navigated or sailed through. And it was evening, so the sun was starting to go down. And back then we didn't have GPS and all the electronics we have now. I had a compass, a sextant, and dead reckoning, the stars essentially. So he said, I decided I would anchor in the mouth of that channel, wake up in the morning and sail it, by the safety of the light of day. So that's what I did. Then he looks at me and he says, Park, have you ever heard that eerie screech of dolphins make in the wild? And I go, no, can't say that I ever have. He goes, well, it's just blood curdling. He goes, I woke up to that at 5 a.m. and I went up on deck and here I had 8 dolphins frantically swimming around my boat with this screech. I said, what were they doing? He goes, well, I looked up and I realized the tide had gone out much further than I had intended, or I thought would happen. And he goes, I had about 30 minutes before me and my sailboat were impaled on the lava rock below. I said, do you think they knew that you were in peril and they were waking you up? And he says, what else were they doing? So he said, I pulled up my anchor and I sailed through the channel. And I go, that is an incredible story. I said, have you ever told anybody in business that story before? He goes, no, nobody's ever asked. But then he got this smile on his face. And I said, what? What's up? He goes, I just realized, Park, before every major sale I ever made of a car wash into Australia, it always came on the heels of me telling a story about one of my adventures sailing around the world. I never realized that before. And I said, why, Per, do you think that is? He goes, I have no idea. I said, because your customer is living vicariously through you, enjoying that tale. But even more importantly, you were building trust with them. Because who would I want to buy an expensive German car wash from other than a guy who had the ambition, the industriousness, the courage, and the ability to sail around the world by himself. So I know if I ever have problems with that car wash, I've got a pretty good idea you are going to have my back. And he just looked at me and he goes, I never thought about that before. That's kind of a long example. 2 stories I told you right there. One about me and what happened to me and talking to him and an aha moment I got out of it. But the second story about him, and him realizing that these persons have tremendous impact.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense because not only is the storytelling, bringing the person into the experience, but it also shows so much depth within the person, their character. Like you said, that he's industrious, all these things, like you see them. It's almost like you can see them so much more clearly in the deeper levels of and connect to that humanness and almost see yourself in him, and it creates like this very beautiful connection, and it makes so much sense. I love it.
And I bet you experienced that when you started telling your stories and what you went through. I bet you had that same effect on people.
I did, and I think a lot of times like people, we we want to show up perfectly, right? We want to show up and we're like, I'm great. Everything is awesome. Nothing is wrong. You know, and it's like this like weird robot thing that people want to do where it's like, no, that's not real. Like, I don't think that's real, you know? And, you know, that comes with a lot of doing a lot of inner work to like not, well, first you have to fully accept yourself in your authentic self to then be okay with then revealing your most authentic self to, you know, the world, and not being swayed whether people like it or don't, you know what I mean? And really being anchored in like, this is who I am, this is my story, and it is, and for those of you that resonate, it's for you, and for those of you that don't, it's not for you, and being okay with that as a business owner, as a human being, really, you know what I mean? Just being okay with like yourself and your truth and accepting that. Yeah, so
Now, what I'd like to do, Diana, is
mhm.
if I can unpack my story a little bit for your viewers and your listeners and show them the elements that I talk about, because at the Business of Story, I talk about learning the applied science and the bewitchery of storytelling. You have to understand the magic if you're going to cast the spell. So what I did in the telling of that story is I used what I call the 5 primal elements of story, and everybody can do this. So when I first started off, and remember, I've got a double layered story here. I made it more complex. I had my
I'm here for
story
it.
and then I had his story, but they all used the same thing. So let's first start with mine before we go to Paris' story.
Okay.
I gave you a timestamp. I
Yeah.
said last year in Melbourne. If I was really thinking, I would have been even more specific, and I would have said, you know, early March 2019, I was in Melbourne, Australia. Timestamp, location stamp. What that does is it triggers and hooks the limbic system, our subconscious, and our caveman, cavewoman brain says, oh, Park's about ready to tell me a story. I should pay attention because I need to learn from it in case whatever happened to him is going to happen to me. That's the fundamental structure of stories being a learning tool in our subconscious, and that's why you can use it to hack through the noise and hook the hearts of your audiences. Timestamp. Early March 2019, location step, Melbourne, Australia. In my part of the story, I'm the center of the story. I'm the central character saying I was out there and I was working, and I was asked a question about how do you use business and storytelling. So when I was coaching Pear how to do that, I talked about, well, let's do an example of it. So we have action now. And the action is, have you ever used a story in work? Oh, no, I never have. Or, well, then take me to a time when. And so then he told us his amazing story.
Yeah.
That is the sort of the surprise to my action because that story was so amazing. And then he comes back and he said, wow, I realized that before every major sell, I always told them a sailing story, and that got them on board. That's the business point. I don't have to sit here and say business stories work. He proved it for me. His story told him. So I had a timestamp, a location stamp, when it happened, where did it happen, central character your audience can relate to. In this case, it's me. Since you have me on here, I'm trying to get them to relate with me. The action of me teaching, showing Pear that the stories work in business, and then the surprise that came out of that with the story he told me that made my business point that stories work. Okay, so there's the 5. Now, let's transfer over to Pear's story. What did he do? Timestamp. He was 21 years old. Young man, I had mentioned he was 59 years old, but he started sailing when he was 21. Your brain does the math and goes, oh, okay, so that was about, 35 years ago, almost 40 years ago. Wow, young guy's pretty amazing. 30 years ago, I guess. So where? Stockholm to Melbourne. Oh, okay. So now I've got a place and time this happened. Then we went even more specific. He is now the center of the story, and we are living vicariously through his story. He's at the Channel and the Galapagos Islands. Okay, so we have our whole setting. Action. I wanted to sail that channel, but I had never done it before, so I waited for the safety of daylight. We have surprise out of that action. These dolphins show up, swim around, wake me up. I don't get killed. I'm able to make it. Here, all these years later, I made a fabulous career in the car wash business. Then we have the aha or business point. I just realized, Park, before every big sale I made, I told a story. So unpacked 2 levels of story here, but using the exact same 5 primal elements of story. Timestamp, location stamp, 1 central character in your tale, action and surprise that comes out of that action that leads to an aha moment that makes your business point for you. I'll take a breath right now.
Wow. Yeah. Beautiful. It's a masterpiece.
But I bet you too, Diana, since you use story a lot, you intuitively know this, just what I took you through. Now I just want you to be intentional about it. Because what happens when you intuitively do it, you start defaulting back to what you know, what's easy. You default back to generalities, and you think your audience is with you because you know your story so well, and they're not, because you're leaving out the specifics. So be intentional using just those 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely see where there's times where like I get too businessy and realize that like I'm running a heart-centered business and that story, some aspect is missing. And so it's really so interesting to understand like, yeah, I am intuitive, but definitely wanting to be more intentional with your story in order to really connect with the people that want to hear it, right? That are going to be impacted by it, and that are really needing your story. So where can people find more of your work?
Well, right here, The Business of Story, or just go to businessofstory.com.
Yes.
There they will find 5 years of podcasts every Monday. I'm working on about 280 episodes now. I interview story artists from around the world in every aspect of story, from story creation to marketing to, I just had one on coming on actually next week on how to tell your story on LinkedIn. So it's all focused on the different ways you can craft and tell compelling stories within your business that actually sell. I've also got, I am now doing, it's come out of nowhere. It's you know, you're talking about from trauma to triumph. So we
Yeah.
all are just completely rattled by COVID, and it's had a lot of trauma in our lives. It's messed us up mentally in some cases. It's totally destroyed businesses. I almost lost my younger brother, who's a year and a half younger than me, to COVID up in Seattle. Very healthy guy. He got it, spent 6 weeks or 6 days in the hospital, 4 of those in ICU. Had him on my podcast to tell his whole harrowing story. But out of this, I've had people come to me and say, Park, I realized soul searching, I need to refine my brand story, but you know, I don't have the money because business has been off and I don't have the time and I'm distracted. So what I'm doing right now is I've just launched 3-week intensive sprints. And what I'm doing in that, I have a cohort of 10 professionals, and they get to work with me for 3 weeks. We have 6 live sessions on a Tuesday and a Thursday. On a Tuesday, I share the principle, the theory for that week that they're going to work on to dial in the brand story and teach them how to tell it. On Thursdays, then we get to have practice sessions as they've done that in practice. And so I do that for 3 weeks in a row. And my promise is when they're done is they will have their brand narrative pulled together that is uniquely their own to demonstrate how different and distinctive they are on the marketplace. And I will teach them the frameworks like this one I just taught you and your viewers here, so that they can actually tell that story. And it was a wild idea I came up with last week. I basically have filled 2 of my first 2 groups, which tells me there's a lot of interest in it. And by the time this airs, I will probably have launched group 3 and group 4. If any of your viewers are interested in it, again, track me down at park@businessofstory.com or go to the website, and I'll have it there for them to look at.
For sure. Yeah. We're going to actually attach your website and all your information on the page that this interview is on. So if you guys are interested in sharing your story, if there's something that, you know, you've experienced, maybe something that has happened within this year during COVID that, you know, you've overcome, like you said, your brother overcame COVID. I actually got COVID as well and overcame it as well.
Can I ask you real quick, how was that? Did you have it bad, or were you able to get through?
Yeah, I'll tell. My story doesn't have that much conflict, but I'll tell it anyway.
What's getting at is conflict. Yeah, okay, timestamp.
Okay, let me see. I'll give you a timestamp. It was August of 2020, and I had went to the gym when it opened, and it was like, I don't know if you know San Diego, Southern California. It's like
Our daughter lives there.
Yeah, they weren't really, abiding by all the rules and stuff. And, I was so healthy. I think I got a little overconfident. I was like, I'll be fine. And it was also my immune system. I wasn't sleeping well. Like I had just moved. So I was a little stressed out. So my immune system had dropped, definitely left me open and vulnerable. I got COVID. It was pretty bad. Like I would say like the first 3 days where like, you kind of stand up and you're just like out of breath, and you just have to sit down. Like I would be looking at the fridge and I just wanted to make dinner, but I just couldn't because like you're so exhausted. And, I remember like my nose closed up and I definitely couldn't breathe. And I could like, thank God that I'm young and I'm healthy and I'm pretty fit. I work out pretty often. And I also work with a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. So, he had set me up with just like a 7-day regimen of like these like ancient Chinese herbs. And within 15 minutes of drinking the first like mixture he made me, I was like almost completely back to normal. My nose cleared up and everything, like my energy came back. And it was crazy. I would say from that point on, I just continued to get better. I finished the 7-day regimen he gave me and I was almost like back to normal. It was really, really mild for me. And so, if anybody's out there, just know that, traditional Chinese medicine is definitely a viable route to explore. If you want to try it out. And, for me, I don't really trust Western medicine as much. So I was not trying to go to any hospital or do any of that. But I can definitely feel like those first 3 days before I got the medicine, how, if I was maybe having some just immune disorders or things that would make me more vulnerable, how it would be very, it would possibly take me down, so it was real. What it showed me was that it's real and it is something that we should be very careful of, but we also, the message here is that you have options and it is beautiful and you can overcome it. So that's my story.
So awesome. Can I quickly analyze that for you?
Yes.
So beautiful. So in August, you were at the gym in San Diego, timestamp, location stamp.
Yeah.
You just hooked the limbic system of your listener, of your viewer. They're like, something happened to her. I got COVID. Oh my God. So you are the center of this story, Pete. Now we are now living vicariously through you. She gets COVID. There's the action. Oh my God. What happened? We're just on the edge of our seats. How sick did you get? That's what we're thinking. And so you said, 3 days. I looked at the refrigerator. I wanted to get up to make dinner. I didn't even have the lung capacity or the energy to do that. And I'm a fit person. And by looking at you, I can tell you're fit. Young, fit, healthy, and that was having the impact on me. So that is so beautiful. Now we have the surprise element. Because most of the people that are listening to you I imagine, are kind of, we're stuck in Western, medicinal culture. I went to a Chinese practitioner, doctor. I don't know. Did you characterize him? Is he a healer or whatever?
Oh no, he's just a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. He owns his own practice here, and I did like a virtual like consultation thing with him. But I've worked with him before, so I knew him already. Yeah.
So you took this tincture. Now that's going directly against all Western medicine, but it had an immediate impact and immediate help, and you got through it. And within 7 days, you felt good right away, but 7 days you were done. So from my standpoint, the first question I had in mind, if I was buying something, would this work for my brother? That's the first question. I said, wow, you are living proof. You have a true story you shared about what you went through. My brother, being our age and growing up in America and having a mom who was a nurse for many, many years, we are Western culture, medicinal people. So I was thinking, would this help a long hauler? Because even though he got over it in April, he still is having problems today. And he's a healthy guy. He's older than you are, but outdoorsman, great shape. And so I'm asking myself, would that be good for him? So if someone were selling or sharing that kind of medicinal practice, that would be a perfect story to share it, because it allows us to arrive at the sale without you selling anything. You're just educating and sharing your experience through the power of a story.
Yes. Beautiful.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah. yeah, absolutely. I think about it too, as much as I hear about people, like suffering, like I was like, I should share this story. So thank you for allowing me to share this on
Yeah,
here.
and where did you go? And should other people look into it? I mean, let me ask you this: do you feel a little bit weird or vulnerable about telling people that you went to Chinese practice?
Oh
So
no.
why wouldn't you tell them?
I guess I've just been, I did tell it like on my own social media channels and to my audience. But I'm also like a person that like kind of like moves on from things very quickly. So once I was like, I moved on, I was like, all right, I'm on to the next, So, and so, yeah, like I try not like, I try to stay very present. And so, I guess that there comes that too, where it's like, well, if you're telling stories, that we kind of have to go back into the past, right? We have to
Yeah.
kind of look back and pull those experiences and those emotions and things. And then there's also this other like Zen part of me that's like, I am present and all that is now, and so so yeah, trying to mix those both too, because obviously there's a story of how I got so Zen and why I'm present now and all this stuff. So yeah, it's really interesting. I love this. I'm actually really interested
Well,
in. Go ahead.
past, present, future. That's you have these stories, so you make a story library that you can pull up from the past,
Mm-hmm.
use in the present to help someone have a better future.
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
Sorry, I interrupted, but
No,
you just
no,
made that just bigger in my mind.
no. That was perfect. That was perfect. I think there's a little bit of a lag too, so that's why it's. But
I'm coming to
Park.
you from the
It's been.
mountains. That's probably why.
I'm sorry.
I said I'm coming to you from the mountains. A friend of mine's mountain cabin with Wi-Fi that the squirrels are probably chewing on the coax cable outside. That's maybe why we have a little bit of lag.
Yeah, it's all good. But Park, I really, really enjoyed talking to you. I learned so much from you. Things that I was actually, like you said, like I was intuitively doing, but now I can
Mhm.
actually be intentionally doing. And yeah, I'm like super excited. I actually want to dive into your work after this. And for those of you who are watching, if you guys want to dive into your work, all of Park's links and all of his offerings are attached in the email that you got this interview in, as well as on the site that this interview will be hosted on. And I'm so glad you joined us. And I'm so happy to be connected with you and to continue to, yeah, learn from you and follow your journey of whatever else you create, because it's useful. And I think, also what I'm really understanding and seeing now too is that a lot of companies are really moving towards like more of a conscious way of relating to their customers and more of this like heart-centered approach of sales. And I think that's kind of where people want to be. They don't want to be sold to, they want to connect. And definitely in a world where things are a little crazy right now, upside down right now, connection is everything. It's everything. So
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
yeah, beautiful work. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of Transforming Trauma to Triumph. I'm your host, Diana Min, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.